PlayStation is home to some of the most truly talented single-player game studios ever produced. Whether that be something from their first-party lineup or one of their third-party offerings, there always seems to be something to play. And one of the developers we'll be talking about today happens to be Naughty Dog. But what can there be said about Naughty Dog? They are truly a studio with amazing talent and great writers willing to immerse players in worlds that are so well crafted that you will find yourself wanting to replay the stories over and over again. You see, my journey with Naughty Dog didn't start with Jak and Daxter on the PlayStation 2. It started with a franchise sequel I had no idea existed until the Christmas of 2010.
What's going on? That's my blood. That's my blood. It's a lot of my blood.
Uncharted 2 Among Thieves is one of my favorite video games ever made, and for the longest time it was my favorite game of all time. That was until I played Mass Effect 2, quickly stealing the title from it. But even today I still love this game, and hell, it's still in my personal top 5 games. I will never forget the opening of Uncharted 2 quickly immersing my young self into a world of treasure hunting and adventure. Nonetheless, I realized that I was late to the game's arrival because Uncharted 2 launched back in 2009 while I received it a year later in 2010. I felt late to the party, however I was glad I jumped on the Naughty Dog train when I did because my young self was going back and forth at the time playing my two favorite games, one which was obviously Uncharted 2 and the other being Batman Arkham Asylum.
Hey, Sharpie. Love what you've done with the place.
To say I played these games a lot was and still is a complete understatement. Now, at the time, my house did not have internet because I was living out in the rural areas, and there really was only 3 sources of gaming news I would get. One, I would either go to the library to get internet access, which I really didn't do all that much because I was relying on my mom and dad to take me. And 2 was from magazines. I know, really old school, right? And in particular, it was the PlayStation, the official magazine. Man, those things were awesome, okay? The OGs know, like, looking at the shelves in the grocery store and always seeing them, you know? I used to love getting them. But last but not least, there was a program on Dish Network called G4. And I know this is pretty old school, but I used to watch X-Play all the time, anytime it came on, because that's how I'd get some of my news. Even on the reruns, I would watch that just to learn more about gaming.
X-Play, weeknights at 6:30.
And you're probably asking yourself right now in the point of the video, like, why am I telling you all this? Well, because quickly after the end of 2010, I remember reading certain articles about Naughty Dog finishing up development on Uncharted 3 and switching up their tone of storytelling for another upcoming project, going for a more adult-themed game rather than the lighthearted adventure titles that they were previously known for. And so, life moved on for me, and for the rest of 2011, I ended up moving to a place where I had internet, and lo and behold, by the end of that year, with the reminders still fresh in my mind and eager to see what this studio was cooking up, I was treated with a trailer that would quickly change how I viewed Naughty Dog and what they were capable of.
Hey.
There you are. You okay?
Better than that guy.
Today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite video games of all time made by Naughty Dog. And I know, a lot of people have talked about this game to death on many channels before mine, but hey, you saw the tagline on my channel, or if you didn't, it's basically, if I find it fascinating, I nerd out about it and I talk about it. So why not throw my hat into the ring, right? We are going to be solely focusing on The Last of Us, or Part 1 if you want to be particular. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about some of my takes on Part 2 and briefly touch on the TV show that everyone seems to really like, even though I really don't care for it. So, if you don't mind a small YouTuber nerding out and talking about a game he loves and always plays time and time again, then I welcome you to sit back, relax, grab a drink, get a snack as we venture out into the post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Conditions in anticipation of tomorrow's PlayStation 3 launch. It marks a new era in gaming with lifelike graphics and motion sensing controls. CH's Shirley Engel is live outside Best Buy in Burlington tonight with some die-hard gamers. Good evening, Shirley.
Good evening, Nick. Well, the lights are out and the doors are closed at this location, but just check out this lineup of customers just waiting for the crack of dawn. That's when 21 PS3 consoles will hit store shelves, and despite the weather, they say it's worth the overnight wait.
The PlayStation 3 had a very interesting life cycle, from being revealed all the way back in E3 of 2005 and released the following year in November of 2006. With a steep price point and only a few games at launch, the console had a slow start compared with the Xbox 360, quickly taking the lead on Sony's console because of the prior release the year before. Sony had an ace up its sleeve though, to keep investing in studios. But it was challenging to say the least. With monumental games and exclusives that Xbox had at the time, like Halo 3 selling just over 14 million copies, as well as Gears of War with healthy sales numbers. The 7th generation was truly an awesome time to be a fan of games, because just as Microsoft was hitting their peak, PlayStation began catching up.
$2.99? Bernie, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. That's how World War I got started. While $2.99 for the sweetest gaming, Blu-ray playing, movie downloading system in the world would be fantastic. No comment.
But all that stuff says $2.99. Right behind you.
I'm sorry, you said something?
PS3, now $2.99.
Games like Metal Gear Solid 4, Gran Turismo, and of course Uncharted were all healthy selling games to keep the console going well into its life cycle. And by the end of the generation, Microsoft's console sold 76 million units versus Sony just edging out with 77 million. The Xbox 360 is one of the best consoles ever made, and without a shadow of a doubt won the first half of the 7th generation. However, with Xbox shifting towards the Kinect and latter half of the console's life, instead of focusing more on games, you could say it hurt its final sales. With PlayStation finally catching up after 7 long years to surpass Microsoft. Then, finally, on June 14th, 2013, before the dawn of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, one of PlayStation's last exclusives to send off the system came out to critical praise.
Did we lose him?
Yeah,
But we're not in the clear, right?
not while we're in this city.
With a Metacritic score of 95 and a user review score of 9.2, it was abundantly clear that Naughty Dog had a classic on their hands. The years of development, as well as the countless promotions from PlayStation marketing the game, had paid off. In the first launch week, the game sold 1.3 million copies. The game was proving not only to be a fun and enjoyable experience, but taking a more mature themed story route seemed to be the right choice. You could not escape this game, especially if you were on YouTube back in the day, with so many YouTubers and Let's Players posting their walkthroughs and garnering millions of views in the process. But why were so many people enthralled with this game? Well, because when you have compelling characters paired with emotional depth, it's quite hard not to find yourself intertwined with this story. The Last of Us, when it launched in 2013, was touted with having some of the best visuals seen in a game. With movie-like cutscenes connecting the gameplay, it was seamless. It was clear that what Naughty Dog had done was push the PlayStation 3 hardware to its limits and showing it off in style. That's all the more prevalent with the remake in 2022. Although controversial, the game is still one of the best looking PS5 games on the system to date. It runs smooth and is the preferred way to experience the game to this day. This is also the majority of footage you will see during this video.
He's in here!
The story of The Last of Us is a simple yet a very easy plot to understand. Like I said before, the game uses this to its strong suit. The story follows Joel in the beginning of this so-called mysterious infection or outbreak. The game has one of the best opening sequences that hits the ground running, as well as hooking the player into recognizing that this world is not a kind place.
No.
From then on, we meet a girl named Ellie, who to Joel and the player at first is a hindrance and a tad bit annoying, but soon turns out to be a hope for humanity as well as growing a strong bond in the process.
Is it?
What are you doing?
Killing time.
Well, what am I supposed to do?
I am sure you will figure that out.
Your watch is broken.
Joel must take Ellie to a place across the post-apocalyptic wasteland where she can help save this decaying world and the rest of the people still surviving in it. Now, what I love about this game is that it has similar aspects to Resident Evil 4, which is not a bad thing at all. It's a game that knows what it wants to be, as well as establishing the stakes for the player early. Now, can you say, or can you call these two games glorified escort missions? Yes, you can. Going across post-apocalyptic America is one of the best journeys you can have in gaming. Paired with great writing is the art design, capturing the desolate landscapes, the crowded towns of the once busy streets. It is simply astounding the level of detail that is put into this world, and I don't think the artists get enough credit for doing that. And speaking of art design, the thought process behind the development of the outbreak and the infected that occurred is absolutely surreal. Everything from how they play and look was thought out to be believable as well as enjoyable to play for anyone that picks up the controller.
And what we realize is because we're making an action game, a lot of the storytelling happens on the joystick. And once we remove the infected, it's like all of a sudden now we can't tell the story through gameplay of what happened to the world. And that's where we kind of went back and kind of brought the infected back in, because it lets you see, once you're fighting them, the threat that people had to deal with that otherwise would just be very cerebral and people could talk about it, but you couldn't necessarily experience it yourself. In a novel that might work, in a game for us, specifically an action game, it didn't work.
The level design, although linear, is well done and paced. Except for those damn ladders, man. I swear to God, it's like a Naughty Dog staple to always just stop and try to find a ladder. I have no idea why.
Damn ladder broke off the wall. Come on!
But outside the story and the level design, how's the gameplay? Because in the Uncharted series, the gameplay was tight, fun, and smooth. And, well, how's The Last of Us? Well, it's also tight, fun, and also responsive. But let's just add one word here, and for those of you that have played the game, understand this wholeheartedly, and that is brutal.
Check over there.
The combat that Naughty Dog decided to go with was hard-hitting, gore-filled, adrenaline-pumping action. It was a stark contrast from the Uncharted series, and it was well-deserving of the rated M for mature rating. The enemy types in the game are fantastic too, from human beings hunting you to clickers stopping you in your tracks to slow gameplay to a standstill, telling the player to be wary the moment they hear those dreaded sounds.
Which is the clicking phase. And if they mess with the eyes, we end up saying, well, how do they get around? Oh, echolocation. And they use a form of echolocation to track down their enemies.
Just like bats, or even some blind people can see by making a clicking sound, a sound that on its own wouldn't be very scary. And then to associate it with something that people in this world are very fearful of, so that as you're exploring an environment, all of a sudden you hear this click, and you're seeing everybody just get frightened, just everybody duck, everybody hushes.
Great. The enemy types keep the game engaging, forcing the player to think out engagements due to limited ammo counts as well as supplies. But you may be asking yourself, well, obviously, Brandon, you played it on release, right? No, I didn't. You see, at the time, my parents as well as myself didn't have a lot of money, so when I went to GameStop to select a brand new game for $60, well, my mom was not going to help me get it. Instead, I went ahead and I got the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot, which, I'm not going to lie, is actually a very, very good game, and plus it didn't help my case that it was 50% off at the time, because it really wasn't selling all that well. Even though I wanted The Last of Us, I understood why I couldn't get it, and I was happy to get that instead, and I resulted to watching The Last of Us playthroughs on YouTube. Like I said before, when The Last of Us released, it garnered praise from around the gaming industry, with review outlets giving it high scores and 10s all over the place, and it was rightfully deserved in my mind. The character performances were amazing, from Troy Baker to Ashley Johnson, and fun fact, you know Nathan Drake from Uncharted, right? Well, I hope you do. He is voiced by Nolan North, one of my favorite voice actors, and having a relationship with Naughty Dog the studio, they brought Nolan in to try out some characters. David, the character you run into during the game, is voiced by Nolan North. This dude's range is unreal. I didn't even know he voiced this guy until a couple years ago when I started doing research and looking at the behind the scenes footage.
He showed me the art, and I said maybe it's something like this, where everything's, it's very quiet. And just, he's not really sure, and the voice can break a little. And he just looked, he goes, yeah, that's it.
Granted, with Naughty Dog releasing the Left Behind DLC to add more to Ellie's story and journey, the full package was here. You also had a highly, and I mean highly, underrated multiplayer mode in The Last of Us as well, which, till this day, I have no idea why, and I quite frankly can't understand why they didn't port it over to Part 1, the remake that released in 2022, because it is damn good and intense as hell. After the dust settled on the release of The Last of Us, it was time for a new console generation, with reveals of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One following late that same year in 2013. It was clear that new games were on the horizon, and studios quickly got to work to develop their games. 3 years after the launch of the PlayStation 4, Sony decides to hold a press conference to show off some new games and announce some new titles, much like the E3 press conferences of the past and PlayStation showcases of today. The PlayStation Experience, which is what they decided to call it in 2016, was off to a solid start, showing games off like The Last Guardian and Gran Turismo Sport. It was a pretty solid showcase, but then Sean Layden takes to the stage to say they have one more announcement in store, and with fans eager to hear this unknown announcement, the video begins to play.
Must be God of War.
The Last of Us 2 was finally announced with an amazing trailer running natively on PlayStation 4 hardware. It was clear that Sony would have wanted a sequel due to the prior success of the first game. And The Last of Us 2 launched on June 19th of 2020, and while anticipation was high, the reception was mixed when it finally got into players' hands. Now, let me just say this, I understand that the second game has some so-called quote-unquote speed bumps, because while I enjoy the gameplay like many others, and quite frankly think it's the best gameplay that Naughty Dog has ever done, the story downright destroys some characters in my personal opinion, and leaves them in terrible positions for future games. There are lots of themes in The Last of Us Part 2, like how far will you go for revenge, and is it worth it? But the story botches characters and what they would do in certain situations. There's honestly a whole can of worms I can open up with this, but this video is mainly focused on the first game, so I will keep it at that. Just know, if you do go into the second game, be prepared to be upset and frustrated with a lot of the writing. Now, obviously, with modern times and streaming services, it was only a matter of time till The Last of Us got a TV show or got picked up by a streaming site, and lo and behold, it was HBO. Now don't get me wrong, I like HBO. They have produced some of my favorite television shows of all time, like The Sopranos, The Wire, and of course Game of Thrones. And when I heard they were doing this, like many others, I got super excited. However, even though I think the show got a solid casting and had some good episodes, particularly the opening one, I just didn't care for the show, and it wasn't the same. It didn't feel the same. And I know people right now are probably saying, well, no shit, it's not going to be the same. It's an adaptation. They're trying to do some stuff differently. The best way I can describe it is, for instance, World War Z. The book of World War Z is downright awesome, having first-person accounts from across the world in this interview style, which makes it so realistic. It's so good, you can imagine a miniseries done by HBO, and it would be perfect for it. Then the movie comes out with Brad Pitt, which is nothing like the book, even though it has some cool scenes. Now, I know The Last of Us show is obviously more faithful, but the comparison I'm trying to make here is that sometimes when you care for something, no matter who does the adaptation, especially if it's from a game that you and many others love, it just won't be good enough to capture the same feelings that you experienced playing it. I know it sounds stupid and downright won't make sense to a lot of people saying that, but with how good The Last of Us plays, along with its movie-like presentation, in my opinion, if you want to experience The Last of Us, just play the damn game. The game itself presents it in such a way that you'll be actually playing and actually gaining more from the experience. Now, do I think the show sucks? No. I think it's okay. This is just a standpoint from a guy who's very passionate about it and holds the game to a very, very high regard. So, sorry for that little mini tangent.
What's the ETA?
Couple minutes. Fuck! I thought we were just gonna hold him up or something.
Overall, even though the series might turn people away in the second game, or make them eager for a third, the studio Naughty Dog is above all else talented at what they do. From going to an action-adventure as well as an eccentric journey to a more grounded experience rooted in survival and chaos, the original Last of Us is a game that I personally love and always seem to go back to every couple years to replay it. It's worth not just experiencing time and time again, but as a masterclass blending of story and gameplay.
Now, I know that's not what you want to hear right now.
Swear to me. Swear to me that everything that you said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Okay.
Your mind's getting harder as the weeks slip away. It can turn on a dime, pass you up blind when you wait for the truth to come your way. Your time will come if you let it be
just come after her.